Welcome. We hope that this PLD review will aid you in calibration. Be sure to pause the presentation and read each slide before you continue. When determining the rating for a student, don't isolate the description. Look at each level in the rubric as a whole. Be careful that you don't try to match a single bullet to the listening sample. How often and how much did the teacher need to prompt, clarify, or simplify for the student before an answer was given? Did the student need clarification from a peer? Also, remember to focus on their listening, not their speaking, when rating in this domain. In spontaneous informal speech, ELLs who have learned a little English may hear some individual high-frequency words that they will be able to distinguish in highly routine classroom situations, such as today, buses, day, go, etc. However, they cannot understand enough English to make sense of spoken messages delivered at a normal speed and without linguistic accommodations. Beginning listeners struggle to identify and distinguish individual words and phrases during social and instructional interactions that have not been intentionally modified for ELLs. Beginners can be expected to struggle significantly to understand what they hear even when extensive linguistic accommodations, adaptations, and supports are provided. Beginners benefit most from having a teacher or peer translate what is said into their native language. An intermediate listener is able to understand much more of the message than a student at the beginning level. Typically, students at this level are able to understand enough key words and phrases to capture the general meaning or general idea, the gist, of the message. Intermediate listeners often identify and distinguish key words and phrases necessary to understand the general meaning or the gist during social and basic instructional interactions that have not been intentionally modified for ELLs. Advanced listeners are usually able to understand the main points and most of the details of this type of speech, even when the message is not linguistically simplified. As shown here, there are still some gaps in understanding unusual constructions and words used in unfamiliar ways. Advanced high listeners are usually able to understand most words and details in routine spoken messages, even when the messages are not linguistically simplified. This advanced high student understands that the class will leave after the announcements and be gone the entire day. The student understands that the permission slip must be brought back signed. The student does not understand what chaperone means, and therefore doesn't understand what the parents will be able to volunteer for. It is important to keep in mind that students at the advanced high level have difficulty understanding certain things they hear, particularly when low-frequency words are used. At the advanced high stage, though, students understand enough of what they hear to need only minimal second language acquisition support to engage meaningfully in academic and social interactions. In these slides, the ellipses indicate think pauses and hesitations. In the case of the beginning student, the ellipses may also indicate spots where the speech was unintelligible. In this example, you see that the student mainly speaks using single words and short phrases, high-frequency concrete vocabulary, keywords and key expressions for basic communication in academic and social contexts, lack of ability to connect ideas and speak in sentences, some sentences and words based on recently practiced, memorized, or highly familiar material, frequent inaccuracies and communication breakdown when trying to convey information beyond the linguistic level. Overall, little or no functional ability to speak English in academic and social settings. Intermediate features of speech sample on this slide. The student's responses are general and lack detail. Second language acquisition inaccuracies increase when the student tries to use more than simple structures in highly familiar English vocabulary, such as because to feed him with the bread. Although telling about what he would do with a duck requires a complex verb tense, the student uses present tense. In general, the student struggles to respond to this task because it calls for hypothesizing, which requires use of complex verb structures containing would and could. Note that the student's limited listening proficiency interferes with his responses towards the end of the sample. Intermediate features of the speech sample on this slide. This speaking task requires the ability to explain a story from pictures, which requires more than basic vocabulary and the use of more complex language structures to speak in detail. The student shows a basic ability to express simple, original messages in short sentences. The student is able to speak using vocabulary he's been learning. However, the student pauses frequently due to the increased language demands of the task. Limited English vocabulary and language structures greatly affect the student's ability to connect ideas and narrate the story with details and precision. He makes frequent errors associated with second language acquisition. Summary of intermediate features represented in this student's speech samples include basic vocabulary used for everyday communication, emerging awareness of English grammar structures, most comfort and success using present tense, simple brief responses with hesitations and pauses, simple sentence structure, frequent second language acquisition errors. Speech usually understandable to people who work with ELLs. Advanced features of the speech sample on these slides. The student shows an emerging ability to use complex and longer sentences. The student shows enough grasp of basic grammar features to narrate and describe in some detail using the past tense. The student makes second language acquisition errors that don't interfere with the communication. Complex and longer sentences. The student shows enough grasp of basic grammar features to narrate and describe in some detail using the past tense. The student makes second language acquisition errors that don't interfere with the communication. Advanced high features of speech on this sample. Instances of unnatural phrasing and linguistic errors are minor and don't interfere with communication, such as "it claps the clothes on it." The student is able to comfortably describe the object that he has felt in a bag. In doing so, he uses vocabulary and grammar structures in a manner nearly comparable to that of native English-speaking peers. Advanced high features of the sample on this slide. Student exhibits spontaneous extended speech with infrequent hesitations. The student is able to effectively communicate about his fishing experience using subject-specific vocabulary, such as fishing rod and catfish. Review the K1 reading PLDs and note the overall English proficiency described in the summary statement for each level. Then examine the main features of each level and note how the descriptors bring greater definition to the summary statements, showing the continuum of English language development across the levels, beginning as little or no English ability, intermediate limited ability, advanced ability with second language acquisition support, and advanced high ability with minimal second language acquisition support. The K1 reading rubric requires the rater to consider how well the student can use the English language to build foundational reading skills. Students in K1, whether ELLs or not, vary widely in their early literacy development and may be at different developmental reading stages regardless of second language acquisition issues. For this reason, the K1 reading rubric considers the extent to which the student can use the English language to build foundational reading skills through oral reading activities as well as through activities that require actual decoding of text. The bulleted descriptors address the following features and show the continuum of English language development across the levels. The first descriptor is comprehension of stories read aloud, oral reading. The second descriptor, recognizing and understanding simple environmental print, high-frequency words, sight vocabulary. Third descriptor, decoding grade-appropriate English text. Review the footnote at the bottom of the rubric concerning the fact that the third descriptor in each level applies only to students who are at the developmental stage of decoding written text. Students not yet at this stage should be rated on the basis of the first and second descriptors in each level. This means that the 4 proficiency level ratings are applicable to K1 students who have not yet reached the developmental stage of decoding written text. This list of activities is not exhaustive. Teachers may identify other appropriate activities for determining a student's level of English language proficiency in reading. Review the K1 writing PLDs and note the overall English proficiency described in the summary statement for each level. Then examine the main features and note how the descriptors bring greater definition to the summary statements, showing the continuum of English language development across the levels, beginning as little or no English ability, intermediate limited ability, advanced ability with second language acquisition support, and advanced high ability with minimal second language acquisition support. The K1 writing rubric, like the K1 reading rubric, requires the rater to consider how well the student can use the English language to build foundational writing skills. Students in K1, whether ELLs or not, vary widely in their early literacy development and may be at different developmental writing stages regardless of second language acquisition issues. For this reason, the K1 writing rubric considers the extent to which the student can use the English language to build foundational writing skills through oral activities that are based on emergent forms of writing, as well as through activities that involve self-generated connected written text. The bulleted descriptors address the following features and show the continuum of English language development across the levels. First descriptor, use of English to explain self-generated writing, including emergent forms of writing. Second descriptor, use of English to participate in shared writing activities. Third descriptor, use of English in self-generated connected written text. Fourth descriptor, print awareness, and primary language features. Review the footnote at the bottom of the rubric concerning the fact that the asterisked descriptors in each level apply only to students who are at the developmental stage of generating original written text using a standard writing system. Students not yet at this stage should be rated on the basis of other descriptors. This means that the 4 proficiency level ratings are applicable to K1 students who have not yet reached the developmental stage of generating original text using a standard writing system. Note the writing proficiency level descriptors for grade 2 assume that students have reached the developmental stage of generating original text using a standard writing system. When choosing the appropriate level, take care to distinguish between academic achievement and language acquisition. They may have the correct content answers, but your job is to determine their ability to communicate, whether they are listening to the questions or communicating the answers. Having an advanced high level of English language proficiency means no longer having a language barrier that is significant enough to obstruct the learning of grade level knowledge and skills. It does not mean having the English language fluency of a native speaker, nor does it mean that an ELL has a particular level of academic achievement. When wavering between 2 domains, you have to decide if the student understands the message being delivered. Do they understand the gist? Understanding the gist does not have to do with being able to distinguish between what is the main idea versus a detail. The word grasp in the PLD should be understood as a general understanding of, or ability to use, not as a full command of. High-frequency words are words that ELLs who know very little English encounter very frequently and can be made to understand through context, gestures, and pictures, such as greetings, colors, words for family members and classmates, or high-need instructions, such as get out your book or write your name at the top of the paper. Internalized language is language that is part of the ELL's permanent bank, rather than temporary learned English. Internalized language may be contrasted with recently practiced or memorized language that an ELL may forget later. The term support in the PLDs refers to second language acquisition. Support in the PLDs does not refer to the type of assistance that any student might need when learning academic content. Remember to separate yourself from the STAR rubrics and focus on the domain that you're rating. A student will often be more advanced in one domain than in others.